The third aspect of learning that I'd like for you to consider is what kind of learner you personally are. Have any of you done those like learning styles inventories? Have any of you done those? No? I'm going to give you one to take with you today. You may find it interesting. These learning style inventories are questions that you answer that help you understand what kind of learner you personally are. So some of the different kinds of styles that come from the research in this area. Look at first, how do you use, here's your physical senses, which sounds kind of funny, but you've probably heard of these styles. Someone being a visual learner, or an auditory learner, or a kinesthetic learner. Can one of you define what these mean? Yeah.
If you have to see it done, you could do it. If you hear somebody talking about it, you could do it, or you have to actually physically do it to learn.
To learn it, yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So someone who's a visual learner, imagining what you do in a foreign language class, if you were a visual learner and say you're needing to memorize a bunch of new characters or some new vocabulary, what are some things that you might do that would be a good fit for your kind of learning style preference? You need to see things to remember them. So what are some things you can do to help you learn new vocabulary? You had the idea of flashcards, so that's one, because you can see it. And you can put pictures on the flashcard if that helps. You can write it out. What are some other things you can think of? Make post-its?
Poster.
A poster? Okay. What would you put on the poster?
You could put what you need to learn and then hang it up. And then you'll be able to see it.
So it's always like in front of you. How many of you think you're a visual learner? Just a few of you? I am wicked. I know if I can see something and I look at it enough times, I can close my eyes and I can still see it. So if I need to learn a bunch of new vocabulary, if I've written it out like on a big post-it, or like sometimes I put post-its up around. Some people do it like in the bathroom. You're sitting there, you have nowhere else to go. Can't do that if you live in a dorm. But you have things that you can look at, right? And then you can, again, you close your eyes. If you're a visual learner, you might be able to retrieve that right when the time when you need it, say on a test. Another thing that visual learners find really helpful when, say, trying to memorize new vocabulary is related to your idea of associating, making associations, which is, say, drawing out some kind of picture. So if you're learning, like, say, family vocabulary, then you could, I don't know, draw like a family tree, and draw something really dorky. It doesn't really matter what it looks like, but you'll show relationships. So here's your mother and your father, and then you can write it out. Okay, in Russian that's Papa, and then it's Mama, and then you can see it, and you can visualize it because you have some sort of visual cue that your mind can kind of hook on. So these are three basic types that you hear a lot about when people talk about learning styles. And then there are all these different kinds of types of learning styles. Whoops. I'm going to go back. There are learning styles related to the kinds of tasks or activities that you enjoy. There's extroverted or introverted. And these are all kind of X versus Y, like extroverted versus integrated. Each of these types is defined by being not like the other type. So you're either sort of one or the other, or sort of along a continuum. So extroverted language learners tend to enjoy and learn from activities in class where you're, say, doing a role play, where your teacher says, okay, now you're going to be the shop assistant. Now you're going to come up and order, or ask how much does this cost, and you're going to act it out in pairs, say, or in small groups. Extroverts find that kind of social interaction helpful for learning. It's practice that facilitates learning. Introverts get really wigged out about having to be and this, I'm like this, doing like pair activities just kind of makes you nervous. Introverts tend to learn better independently, studying quietly. I'll give you the questions to determine if you're an extrovert or an introvert, but you probably know this about yourself. I won't ask you to tell me what kind you are, if you're an extrovert or an introvert, because if you're an introvert, you don't want to tell us. You want to keep it to, you want to keep it to yourself. I've read some interesting research that shows, that looks at this type across cultures. It says that Americans tend to be extroverted. I don't know if that's true. Do you think that's true? Yeah. I don't know if I buy that. I don't know if we just sort of act extroverted, but we're all closet introverts.
I'm learning Swedish. I live in Sweden half the year. I'll vouch for that being true.
That
Americans are extroverts.
we're more extroverted.
We live in a culture of people who don't raise their hands, would never speak out just the way I'm speaking out. I think of Americans as sort of Labrador retrievers.
How are we retrievers?
We're very friendly.
Oh,
Very friendly.
not like we bring you stuff.
And every once in a
We're
while,
friendly.
we jump up on people with our muddy paws.
Yeah, right. In some cultures, right, Americans are perceived as being surface friendly, that we're, hi, how you doing? Great, see you at lunch. But then when it comes to deep friendships, that we tend to be a little colder, actually. I know Russians perceive Americans as being like that. Like we have a hard time with like real true friendships, but we're sort of surface, smile. Anyway, those topics are really interesting to discuss, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on them right now. So extroverted, introverted. If you're an extrovert, or say if you're an introvert, you might have a hard time with some of the activities that you do in class, and being aware that you're an introvert and that you're not a bad language learner, or that you're just not getting it, but just that this is just kind of who you are. It can be really helpful just to recognize, like, okay, this is just the kind of person I am. Lots of people are like this. It can also help you to come up with ways to push yourself a little bit. We'll talk about that in a bit, how to sort of stretch yourself a little bit in a way that still feels comfortable to you. Some other styles have to do with the way that you approach learning tasks. There's closure-oriented versus open. People who are closure-oriented tend to be very organized and detail-oriented, and like the semester begins and you've got your notebook and you've got your date book and you write out all your assignments ahead of time, and you know what's due when, and is that you? Does her sound like someone obnoxious, or I'm like that. Or there are people who are more open, who enjoy what's called discovery learning, sort of not having everything so regimented and planned out in advance, but they enjoy sort of the journey of learning. And those kinds of learners have a hard time with deadlines, with planning out their learning. If you feel like you're an open kind of learner, to be successful in college more generally, not just in your language courses, you might really have to work on establishing routines and tools that you can use to keep yourself organized and on task, so it's not like the day before the test and you're like, oh, test tomorrow, so that you're plodding along a little bit more methodically. A learning style that opposes global versus particular has to do with how you deal with new information coming at you. Students who are global learners, or people who are global learners, are comfortable with getting sort of the main idea or the big picture, and they don't have to know every little detail. So in a language class, there are students who are maybe comfortable with like learning just one construction, one way of saying something, but they don't have to know like every single form of the verb right away. People who are particular learners really like to know that level of detail, and tend to, in language classes, really want to write out paradigms. Raise your hand if you like to write out paradigms and look at verb conjugations, noun declension. So if you're that kind of learner, that can be really helpful for you in learning new material. It can also be helpful to know if you find yourself in class and your instructor is kind of on a higher level, and you're uncomfortable because you're like, I want the whole chart, right? You want to fill in all the details. Well, if you know this about yourself, you can maybe hold off for a little bit and just know, okay, you can do that after class. That's something maybe you would do for yourself to fill in all the pieces of missing information. Sharpeners and levelers. There are just so many ways you can kind of chop this little pie up. A sharpener is someone who, when memorizing new material, focuses on difference and uses difference as a way to learn new material, versus a leveler is someone who associates new material and is able to remember it that way. Deductive and inductive, this is the last one I'm going to share with you. Deductive learners like to go from the general to the specific, and inductive it's the other way around, from the specific to the general. So say with in a language class, if you're learning a new grammar point, an inductive learner would like to start with, say, some examples and then maybe figure out what the rule is, whereas a deductive learner first wants the rule right up front and then to look for examples that support the rule. Did you know that The Onion writes about learning styles? Oh, I don't have the internet. Crud. Here, hold on. Because no presentation isn't complete without an Onion article. This is what parents of nasal learners demanded an odor-based curriculum. That's kind of a joke. There's an Onion article. So these learning styles, I think, can be really, really helpful in talking about metacognitive strategies and raising your awareness about who you are as a learner. This will help you, again, not just in your language courses, but in your studies more generally. Before you leave, I'll give you this yellow handout. Is a bunch of pages with a number of statements that you sort of agree, indicate if you agree, to which extent you agree or disagree with them, and then it helps you understand in these various areas sort of where do you fit in.